everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Lucy and in today's video I'm sharing with you my top enemies to lovers book trope recommendations. So welcome back to the Romance Wreck series, which I am having a blast filming. Do let me know if you like this series and if you want more videos like this. This is episode 3, Enemies to Lovers. Now, where are my enemies to lovers fans out there? Let yourself be known down in the comments below. Now, with these recommendations, I've really tried to make sure that these have not been repeated elsewhere on my channel or in this series, because a lot of the tropes appear in this video series I'm making. A lot of the tropes appear in several books, and I don't want to talk about the same books all the time. So if you're looking for fresh recommendations, then this video will have you covered. Okay, so we've got a really long list here. I'm gonna have to be speedy. So the first book series I really want to recommend for enemies to lovers goodness is the Kingdom of the Wicked series by Kerri Maniscalco. I'm holding up book 2, Kingdom of the Cursed, but book 1, Kingdom of the Wicked, is, you know, you obviously start with book 1. Start with that book. It is incredible. The reason why I'm holding up book 2 though is because book 1, I would say the romance and the kind of enemies to lovers goodness is like a simmering 5 to 6 level. This just ramps it up to a whole other ball game, and I feel like the enemies to lovers goodness like becomes real in the second book and the third book. So just you wait for those if you have not read Kingdom of the Wicked yet and you want to see the payoff, because it is by far one of the most satisfying enemies to lovers arcs I have ever read. So the first book follows Amelia, who is a witch, and she's kind of living in this historic Italy, like kind of, I want to say like 18th century Italy, 19th century Italy. It kind of feels like those vibes. And her sister gets brutally murdered, who is also a witch. And she needs to find out who did this to her sister. So she makes a bargain with one of the 7 princes of hell. And she makes a bargain with a demon called Wrath, who lives up to his name. He is like the demon prince of anger, you know? So her and Wrath enter into a bargain where he will help her solve the murder. He will help find who did this to her sister Victoria. And what starts is this like incredible tale of witches, demons, and history and lore, and like it's just an absolutely beautiful tale, like so dark, so seductive, so incredible. The first book is YA, but Kerri Maniscalco, the author, ramped up book 2 and book 3 to adult, because the setting for book 2, let's just say like it can't be YA, like it needs to kind of be ramped up. So expect this series to get a lot darker as it progresses, but oh my god, the enemies to lovers is so good. Wrath and Amelia, like a demon prince of hell and a witch who is just trying to find her sister, and they get embroiled into this much larger plot. It is phenomenal, my all-time favorite fantasy series, like it's true, it's one of them. So good. Anyway, I'm gonna stop ranting and raving about this, but please read it. Now, the next book I really want to recommend, just bringing this back, you probably already read this if you're a fan of Regency romance, but book 2 of the Bridgerton series, The Viscount Who Loved Me, is one of the best enemies to lovers books I've read in the Regency romance genre. So it does it so well. This features Anthony, who is the eldest of the Bridgerton family, and he is basically being pressured to marry by his mother, by society. He sets his eyes on Edwina, who is this gorgeous, like she's the diamond of the season, beautiful, like graceful woman. And her sister Kate refuses to let that happen. She's like, no, you are not good enough for her, like you are a rake, you have a bad reputation, I don't want you anywhere near my sweet younger sister. And so Kate and Anthony are sworn enemies, like they hate each other, they are forced together at all opportunities because he wants to woo Edwina, but of course Kate will have none of that. And of course they fall for each other, and it is one of the most like greatest enemies to lovers stories. Obviously Bridgerton is a hugely popular TV series, but I really would recommend reading the books if you haven't yet, because they are so good, and they're slightly different to the series. I think like series 2 of Bridgerton, I've done an entire video review on that, so do watch that if you want to, but I don't think it quite hit the nail on the head compared to the book, so I really would recommend reading the book if you adored season 2 of Bridgerton. the next book I really want to recommend is Captive Prince by C.S. Pacat. So this is a duology, I believe. I think there might be a novella as well in there somewhere. But this I have spoken on my channel before because I absolutely adore this series. This is a enemies to lovers series, kind of set in this like Roman inspired world, featuring the prince of this enemy kingdom called Laurent, and Damon, who is a prince of an enemy nation, and he's basically been sold into slavery of this enemy nation, of which Laurent is part of. And Damon essentially becomes Laurent's slave. So there are kind of trigger warnings here for slavery. Things can get quite dark in this series, like there's a lot of torture, there's a lot of quite explicit sexual scenes. So just be wary if you want to go into this, like look up the trigger warnings and everything. But my God, is this an incredible series. Obviously, it is a queer romance, it's a male-male love story, so Laurent and Damon do, you know, end up getting together, but they are enemies, and let's just say like really big enemies, like they hate each other. But of course Laurent doesn't know who Damon is, he just knows him as a slave. He doesn't know that he's actually the prince of this other nation. So what we have here is just like an incredible like secret identity, Damon trying to hide his identity, but then obviously they fall in love, and it's just, oh, so good, so angsty. If you love all the angst, you will adore this series. So please do read this. I haven't really seen this like talked about on BookTube, so please do talk about the Captive Prince series. I adored it, and I really hope you enjoy it. So the next book I really want to recommend is a very dark romance book. Please look up the trigger warnings again, but this is Still Beating by Jennifer Hartman. So this is quite dark, as I was saying. So again, look things up. It has many different trigger warnings. It really looks at trauma, kidnapping, you know, lots of different heavy issues. But basically this is about our main character who has always hated her sister's fiance, like since they were children. So they've all known each other since they were little, but she's always hated him. They've always been at each other's throats, hate each other. And then on a drunken night out, where they're all kind of on a night out together, she decides to stay at the club whilst her sister and the fiance go home, and kind of leaves her there. And she is drunk and she realizes, I have no way to get home. So the sister's fiance ends up picking her up and lays into her, basically saying like, oh, you shouldn't be out here all alone, blah blah, like you're so useless, blah blah. They hate each other, having a big argument, and then they get stopped by what they think is a police car, and instead they get abducted by a serial killer, and they are forced in this basement. And this serial killer is really sick, like obviously serial killer, but he has this thing where he likes forcing people to fall in love with each other, and he does this by like forcing them to have sexual relations. So again, trigger warnings galore. This is very dark stuff. You can see where this goes, but ultimately it does have a happy ending. The kind of captivity element isn't drawn on for very long, let's just say that. I don't want to spoil anything, but basically they do get freed. They do get out of that situation. And the second half of the book is really just dealing with the trauma, but also them trying to deny their feelings for each other, and really questioning like, are these feelings natural? Like, do we actually love each other, or is it because of this awful situation we were in? So it's a really intense romance book, but I absolutely adored how it was done. It's handled really sensitively, it's written really well, nothing is glorified. I'd really recommend this book. If you're after something a bit darker with a lot more issues, it is enemies to lovers. Like, they hate each other at the beginning, and then they kind of find a truce between the two of them before becoming lovers. So I really would recommend this to those of you who want something just a bit darker. The next book I really want to recommend is Angel Fall by Susan E. Now, can you guys remember, who has been here since the dawn of BookTube, like me? 2012, baby, that's what we're talking about. This book was everywhere. Like, Angel Fall and Susan E were like the biggest books on BookTube. And this is basically an angel fantasy story. Angel Fall is about the fall of the world, and angels have descended to basically end the world. Like, the world is done. The angels have come down and they're destroying the modern world and kind of remaking this world. And the world is basically plunged into chaos. There's disorder, there is just gangs ruling the streets, it's utter chaos. and Penryn is just trying to survive. And that's when she meets Raph, I think his name is, who is an angel. And he has had his wings ripped off, so he is in a dire strait, and she really has to help him. And they only really have each other to help each other survive. The world is falling apart, but she agrees to help him back to this like angel safehold on Earth, where the rest of the angels are, where he can kind of recover and everything. And they really dislike each other at the start because humanity and the angels are kind of in this war. Like, the angels are not perhaps what they seem. There's kind of a darkness to them, and humans are wary of them. They are scared of them. They are their enemies, essentially. So Penryn is really kind of anti-angel and anti-Raph, and by the end of it, they do end up falling for each other. I will not kind of give things away. This is a 3-book series. The second book is called World After, and the third book is called End of Days, and it's just so good. Please read this if you've never heard of this before, because you won't regret it. This is like classic YA, so if you've not read like a YA series in a while, you might be like, oh, this is just so cliche, but honestly, this is one of the best books in the YA genre I've ever read. You won't regret reading this book, trust me. Raph and Penryn are so good together, and the enemies to lovers goodness is perfect. And finally, my final recommendation is another dark romance, because I feel like with enemies to lovers, if you really ramp up the darkness, it's just extra satisfying. So I really want to recommend Haunting Adeline by H.D. Carlton. So trigger warnings galore for this. Please do not start this book without looking them up, because you may be disturbed, and I really was. The second book in the series I had to put down multiple times because I just couldn't deal with it. It was so dark, and even the first book I was like, this is pushing the boundaries of what I'm able to read. But equally, I was really impressed, and I ended up really rooting for the main character and the love interest. So this series is called the Cat and Mouse Duet. You can probably see where this is going. But Adeline lives in this like really creepy house that her grandmother once lived in. And her grandmother was essentially murdered in this house, I believe. So this house obviously holds a lot of memories, a lot of, you know, she basically knows it's haunted, like there's a lot of ghostly goings on. But then she starts to feel eyes on her, and it kind of transpires that she has a stalker. Like, this person is stalking her, he is watching her, and she feels his eyes on her, and she kind of likes it. It's kind of like a voyeuristic situation going on, where she's equal parts terrified and seemingly delighted that this random man is stalking her. But then he actually makes a move, and there is kind of a forcible situation. So again, trigger warnings for all that. But basically they end up having this very twisted enemies to lovers situation going on, where she's basically resisting him the whole time, and he is very controlling and obsessed with her. But the one thing I must say about this book, there is the enemies to lovers stuff going on there with the kind of stalker romance, and at the same time there is a mystery to this book about the murder of Adeline's grandmother and kind of what went down in the house, like how does that all link together. So there's a mystery to this book. It's like a mystery novel with a stalker romance, enemies to lovers. The second book in the series is really effing dark and really kind of escalates from there. But I really think the first book, if you're after some enemies to lovers goodness, like, you can't get more enemies to lovers than this book, I'll just say that. So I would go into this with some preparation, but equally, if you're like me, you'll be really surprised by how good this book was. I was not expecting for really to be rooting for these two twisted, effed up people. Yet here I am, obsessed with them and recommending the book to all of you. So if you're like me, you want some dark romance, then maybe this is the thing for you. Read Haunting Adeline and then read the sequel, Hunting Adeline, and you can blame me for your therapy later, let's just say that. So guys, that is it for today's Enemies to Lovers book recommendations. I really hope you enjoyed this video and these slightly different book recommendations. Please do leave your Enemies to Lovers recommendations down in the comments below, and let me know what tropes you want me to tackle next. Please leave your favourite tropes down in the comments, and who knows, maybe I'll do a romance Rex episode on them. Please do subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you very, very soon with my next one. Bye!